Map, filter, and reduce are some of the most powerful tools in JavaScript. They are all higher order functions and only work on arrays. Whether it's an array of numbers, array of strings, or even array of objects, it does not matter. As long as it is an array, we can use map, filter, and reduce on it. I mentioned higher order functions earlier. So a higher order function is simply a function that either takes another function as an argument or returns a function. Map, filter, and reduce all take callback functions as arguments, which makes them higher order functions. So let us start with map. Okay, so map is used when you want to transform each element of an array into something else. It does not change the original array, keep that in mind, and instead it returns a brand new array. Now let us understand the syntax. As we can see on the screen, map takes a callback function, which makes it a higher order function, and that callback function has three things. Okay, the first is the element, okay, the second is the index, and the third is the array. Now keep in mind, element is nothing but the current element, index is nothing but the current position, and array is the entire array on which it is operating. So let us understand map with an example. So over here, I have an array called people, and let us first, experiment with the syntax. Okay, so first I'll just create a result variable. Let's just explore the syntax. Okay, so I'll do people.map. I'm able to use map on it because people is an array. Okay, now if you remember the syntax, it takes a callback function. Okay, I'm using arrow functions over here. Okay, now within this callback function, there were three things, right? The first one was element, the second one was index, and the third one was array. Remember the names that you gave over here, they are all dummy values. You can give them pretty much anything, but the order is extremely important. Okay, first is element, second is index, and third is array. And you know what? Let's just console log this and see what we are getting for each thing. Okay, things will get much more clear. Okay, so I'm using template literals over here. So element, okay, and then let me add a colon and then add the second one, which is index, and the third one is array, right? Just a second. Yeah, as you can see, first is element, second is index, and third is array. Okay, let us look at the console. As you can see, element is the current element. So first it is at Walter, which is at index 0, and this is the entire array. Okay, the second is Jesse, and then it is at index 1, so on and so forth. Okay, so this is the syntax of map. Mostly we'll be using just the element in most cases. Index and array is also used, but mostly in the examples that you will come across, you will either use element or maybe element and index. Okay, take an actual example, and what we'll do over here is convert each of these elements to uppercase. Okay, so the way we'll do that is using people dot map. Okay, and now within this callback function we'll just use element. I'm just writing el. As I mentioned earlier, you can write whatever you want. Okay, the order is important. Okay, so the first parameter is element. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just do el dot to uppercase. Okay, and this should do the trick. So okay, I even have to log it, my bad. And you know what, let's log two things. One is the original array, and the second one is the result array. And this will prove two things. One, that the original array is unaffected, and it returns a brand new array over here, as you all can see. Now, this was an example of an array of strings, but let's face it, in real life, what you will be encountering is more of array of objects. So let's take an example of the same. So over here, I have an example of characters, which is, as you all can see, an array of objects. What if you had to map through this entire array and just get a finalized array of just the first names? Okay, a very common scenario. Okay, so let's understand how we'll do that using map. So it's pretty simple. So let's call it names only, and we'll take the array. And as you can see, even though it is an array of objects, right, we are still able to apply map on it because it is an array. Okay, so remember, that is the most important thing. I know I've said it like 20 times right now, but yeah, it's pretty important. Okay, so we'll just do el dot first name. Okay, and that's it. We'll get an array of first names. Okay, and as you can see, we have got our thing. Okay, and of course you can do a lot of other operations in between, but this is how you will be mostly using map in your day-to-day coding. Now let's move on to filter. So filter is used when you want to pick certain elements out of an array that meet a particular condition. Again, filter, just like map, returns a new array and does not modify the original. If we look at the syntax of filter, we can see that it is quite similar to map, as in it takes a callback function that takes three values: element, index, and array. But the main difference is in how filter removes certain elements based on a particular condition. Let's understand that with an example. So let us start with a simple example, and then we'll move to a more real world example. So over here I have an array of numbers. Okay, and what I want to do is I just want to fetch all the even numbers, right? So let's understand how to do that using filter. Okay, so we'll again do numbers dot filter. Okay, and over here again it takes three values just like map: element, as we saw in the syntax, right? Element, index, and the array. But now we'll just use element. Okay, and you can type whatever you want. Okay. And the way we find out if a number is even or odd is by using the mod operator. All we need to do is element modulus 2. If that is equal to 0, means the number is even. Okay, and this will only take into account all the elements that satisfy this particular condition. Okay, and this is how filter differs from map. We remove certain elements based on a particular condition. We don't do that in map. Okay, as you can see, we have added this extra condition, and that is what helps filter to remove certain elements based on the condition we have provided. And as you can see, all the odd numbers are gone. Okay, so similarly, you can use this in whatever way you want. Now let us see a more practical example. So over here, again, we have the same characters array, and now let's say we want only those objects. We want only those objects wherein the age is, let's say, greater than 25. Okay, so again, what we'll do is um, greater than 25, and what we'll do is characters dot filter. Okay. Again, like I need to assign this to a new variable is because filter, just like map, returns a new array. Okay. And what we'll do is inside this callback function, we'll take the element, and on top of that, we'll apply factorization, which is el dot age should be greater than 25. And that's it. We should now get, as you can see, two arrays, two records, two objects inside the array, which is Walter and Saul. Jesse gets filtered out because he's not greater than 25. Now let's move on to reduce. So reduce is used when you want to combine all the values of an array into a single result. Now this result can be anything. It can be a single number like a product or a sum, or it can even be an array, or it can even be an object. A lot of people have this confusion. They think reduce will always return a single number like a sum or a product, and they don't take into account that it could also return an array or object. Remember, it will always return a single result. It can be an array, it can be an object, it can even be a number. Okay, keep that in mind. It is very important. Now let's move on to the syntax. If you look at the syntax, just like map and filter, this reduce function also takes a particular callback function. And over here, you can see that there are two new things. One is accumulator and one is current value. Current value is nothing but just like how we had in map and filter, which was the element value, which is like an iterator. It goes over each current item. And accumulator is something new that we'll better understand with an example. But if you also see, there is also an initial value. This is extremely important. And again, we'll see this with an example. Okay, first we'll see a simple example and then we'll move to a more real world example. So over here I have an array of numbers, and our end goal is to find the sum of all these elements within this array. Okay, now why would we want to use reduce over here? Let us understand that first. So the reason is that if you remember in the definition I mentioned that reduce reduces down the value of all the elements of an array to a single unit. Now that unit could be anything, right? It could be a single number, a single array, a single object. Over here we want to find the sum, right, which is a single number, right? And hence we would use reduce over here. Okay, so what we'll do is, and as you can see, right, reduce returns a new array, hence we need to assign it to a particular variable. Now I'm able to use reduce over here because numbers is an array. Okay, now if you remember, reduce takes two main things. One is the callback function and one is the initial value of the accumulator. Okay, so let me add that callback function syntax over here, and the initial value that I'll add over here is 0. As we want to find the sum, our initial value will be 0. Okay, now remember, if you want to return an array, if there will be certain questions where you want to reduce an series of arrays into a single array, in that case your starting value or the initial value will be this empty array syntax. And yeah, if you want to return an object, you will just return a pair of empty curly braces. Okay, now since we want to find the sum, let's see how we do that. Now in this callback function, we had two things. We had many things actually, but two main things that were there were accumulator, I'll call it ECC, and the current element, I'll call it CURR. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to return. Okay, now this can be done in a single line. You all will understand why I'm doing it in this way for debugging purposes, sorry, for explanation purposes. And what we'll do is we'll do ACC, which is the current value. Okay, let me change that to 0. Okay, and I want to add the current element. Just remember, accumulator is what the reduce function will return in the end. Okay, so it is extremely important. Current, as we mentioned earlier, it is nothing but like an iterator. It will first go to the first element, then the second, third, fourth, and so on till the end. Okay, now what will happen with this function? Okay, first of all, let's see if this is returning the correct answer. Okay, it's not returning because we need to log this particular variable. So sorry for that. So as you all can see, this is returning the value perfectly. But how did this happen? Okay, so remember, as I mentioned, the accumulator returns the accumulator's value is returned at the end. Okay, so over here accumulator is 0. So initially it will be 0 plus the current element, which is 1. So 0 plus 1, which will be 1. Now the current value of the accumulator is 1. Okay, and the current value is 2. So it will be 1 plus 2, which will be equal to 3. I know this might be a little tough to wrap your head around at the moment, but let me just do one thing. Let me add a console log, which is why I use these parentheses. Okay, console.log. And over here, let us see after every iteration what value we are getting for accumulator and the current element. This will make things crystal clear. Okay, now that was accumulator and this will be current. Okay, so this will make things much more easier. Trust me. Okay, so as you all can see, the accumulator value, as I mentioned initially, is 0 because here we have added 0. And I can prove that to you all as well. If you add 10 over here, the initial value of the accumulator will be 10. Okay, as you can see. but we need 0, so let's go back to our example. So over here we have 0 and the current value is 1, so the sum that is returned, so the new value of the accumulator will be now 1, and hence this gets updated to 1. Then again we do 1 plus 2, and then that gets updated to 3, then we do 3 plus 3, accumulator value gets updated to 6, so on and so forth. Now of course we don't need all these things, so this was just added for explanation purposes. So this can be done just in, with a single line, as you can see, acc plus cur, and this will give us the same value. Okay, now let us extend this to an array of objects. Okay, so we want to do the same thing. I won't even change the code for now, and we'll just update a single thing and this will work. Okay, so let us say we want to find the sum of all the ages in this particular characters array. Okay, so the code is the exact same as you all can see. Earlier we found a sum of numbers, now we'll find a sum of ages inside an array of objects. Okay, so earlier we were accessing each element using cur, and that was a current element, but over here now the current element is an object, right? So what do we want to access from the object? We want to access the age, right? So we'll just do cur dot age. Okay, and this should not give us the answer because we also need to update this. My bad. Okay, this should give us the answer. If you'll add up all these elements, we'll get 115. My definition for reduce, I also mentioned that we can also return a single array or a single object. Let's understand how to do that using this very same example. Okay, now let's say the problem statement is we want to return all the objects in an array wherein the age is greater than 25. Let's understand how we'll do that. Okay, so for now let me just change this variable. Let's give it meaningful names. Greater than 25, greater than 25. Okay, now over here we have a particular condition, right? Let me just remove this and think about it. We are returning now an array, okay, an array of objects. Okay, so would we want to keep the initial value as 0? No, we want to change this to an array syntax, an empty array syntax. Okay, now we need to add some conditions. Okay, so what we'll do is, again, we'll have our accumulator and we'll have a current element. Okay, and now we'll have an if statement over here. If cur dot age, if that is greater than 25, only in that case we return, only in that case we add it to our array. Okay, and the way we add any element to an array is using ECC dot push. Okay, now ECC is our array. We know that because the initial value of the accumulator we have set it as an array. Okay, and within it we want to pass the entire element. Okay, now of course if you want to pass just the age, you can even pass just that. If you just want to pass the first name, you can even pass that, but this should do the job. Also we need to return the ECC. Okay, remember, if you are using these parentheses over here, sorry, these curly braces for any kind of arrow functions, then you need to explicitly return something. Okay, if you all don't, then you don't need to. And as you can see, we have an array which is a single element of objects with the elements that are satisfying the criteria. Now of course the argument can be made, we can use filter also over here. Yes, and we can. Okay, I'm just telling you that there are more than one ways of doing one thing, okay, in programming, and this is just one way. Okay, the main motive is using reduce we can return an array, a single object, or even a single number. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more. Drop a like if you found this video helpful. Do click on one of the videos that is showing up, or you can even take a look at other videos on my channel or my JavaScript interview playlist. Have a great day.